Hello everyone, let me introduce ourselves. My name is Bimantara Krisna and my presenting number is 8. And our team.
My name is Muhamad Hidayatulla. My number present is 21.
My name is Purwanto and my present number is 14.
Everyone, my name is Stephanus Joseph. My present number is 35.
In this moment, we will be presenting about method research business. Okay, let's go to the topics. Okay, the first one we will talk about the interview. Interview is data collection method that are widely used in the business research of interviewing respondents to get information about a problem of interest. An interview is a guided proposal conversation between two or more people. There are many types of interview, individual or group. Interview can be unstructured or structured and conduct face-to-face, by telephone. Interviewing have four types. The first is unstructured interview. Unstructured interview are so labeled because the interviewer doesn't enter the interviewing setting with a plain sequence of the questions to be asked of the respondent. A possible purpose of the unstructured interview is to bring some preliminary issues to the surface so that the researcher can determine what factor need further investigation in depth. Okay, the second is structured interview. Are those conduct when it's known at the outset what information is needed. The interviewer has a list of predetermined questions to be asked of the respondent either personally, through the telephone or through the medium of a PC. The questions are likely to focus on factors then surface during the unstructured interviews and the considered relevant. And the third, training interviewer. The interviewer must be given a true direction on the research and the trained to start the interview. How to proceed with the question, how to motivate the respondent to answer, what is solved in the answer, and how to close the interviewer. Questioning techniques. Questioning technique is questioning that do not match the question. It is important to ask unbiased question to ensure that you minimize bias in response. And in question technique, we have two technique can you use. The first is flanneling. Flanneling interviewer asking question from broad to narrow them. And the second, unbiased question. Unbiased question is interviewer must ask least. The conclusion for this capture is the interviewer are one method for getting data. They can be either unstructured or structured and can be done face-to-face, by telephone, or through a computer. Interviews can be conducted on an individual but also on a group basis. To minimize bias in response, the interviewer must establish a relationship with the respondent and ask unbiased questions.
The next is doing qualitative research by Josh Boving and Gert De Vries. Chapter 7, Don't Get Lost in the Community on Chapter 7, Don't Get Lost in the Community on Qualitative Analysis. Naturalistic inquirers vary in how they go about in this project. Others prefer to separate their fieldwork on the one hand and the interpretation and possible explanation of their findings on the other hand. They feel useful to first immerse themselves in the fieldwork, letting themselves be guided by hunches, intuition, and luck, and only then to look at the materials gathered with more detachment. They separate the stages of fieldwork and analysis on purpose. Most naturalistic inquirers have an approach to analysis that lies somewhere in between. This part mainly discusses the analysis of material gathered through naturalistic inquiry from the latter point of view. Text and interpretation. Paradoxically, what a naturalistic researcher eventually analyzes is mostly text. Field diaries typically consist of hundreds or even thousands of pages of writing. These pages are filled with the scratch notes that have served as initial mnemonic support, such as various interpretations of the same field notes, observer comments that presented themselves, reflexive memos that came up, musings about emotions experienced, theoretical hunches, and so on. So, it is important that a naturalistic researcher notes whatever he or she encounters and considers relevant in the next is practical methodology. Qualitative analysis in 6 steps. The first step is unitizing. The first thing to do to analyze qualitative material is to cut it up or unitize it. This is the act of distinguishing and delimiting meaningful units in the material. These units may be incidents we have witnessed, scenes in which we participated, situations of which we were part, particular episodes in people's life that they shared with us, stories or parts of stories they told us, fragments of film we felt to be significant, and so on. Unitizing seems a very simple thing to do, yet it is very important from a taxonomic and theoretical point of view. The next step is emergent category designation or coding. The second thing to do is to make categories. This is called open coding or emergent category designation. The naturalistic analyst starts sorting the units he or she has distinguished in the material into meaningful categories and labeling these categories, or called coding. The first one is not yet a category, but a single unit. And the second unit can resemble the first one. In principle, we must continue the process of sorting of our units into categories until all units of material have been sorted into one or more categories. The next step is comparing incidents applicable to each category. With very next unit to be categorized, we have more earlier ones with which to compare it. Each time, we compare all incidents and episodes within a category and compare between the categories. This is the core of constant comparison. In this process, theoretical meanings of our categories will start to emerge, thicken, and in the course to saturate. The next step is integrating categories and their properties. At first, categories will multiply. Later on, the pace will slow down. We gradually need to make fewer and new categories, and we increasingly succeed in summarize units of material under existing labels, which is incidents, episodes, and stories. Some categories spontaneously merge into new higher-order categories. Sometimes this is referred to as axial coding, said by Strauss and Corbin in 1998. Other categories remain distinct, but develop a close relationship with one another. The next step is delimiting theory. In this phase, we will usually be able to reduce the number of categories even further, while simultaneously saturating their theoretical meaning. We should now also be able to link all remaining categories, in this case theoretical concept, through dynamic proportions. The next step is writing theory. An advantage of process theory and the pattern model of explanation is that in their light, the experiences and the interactions of people and their developments are readily told as a story. The art of writing up qualitative or naturalistic research consists of presenting it in a naturalistic way to our readers. The conclusion is, qualitative analysis is sometimes frowned upon more as an art than a craft. The procedures followed seem opaque to some, and the outcome therefore difficult to replicate. These proposed epistemological principles that seem to be primacy of authorial meaning, and the importance of keeping separate authorial meaning and scientific significance. Here also outline a practical procedure that has become more or less standard practice among serious naturalistic inquirers, which is the 6 steps that mentioned before. Chapter 8, tells about society when writing. Thick description and social theory. Thick descriptions aim to present the mental categories of certain communities in such a way that they become transparent to other communities, to social scientists, and the general public. Writing as a first step. Writing presents interpretive actions for sorting out the marking structure. As with all aspects of naturalistic inquiry, there is no standard procedure for that. Cultivating sensitivity to the historical conditions in which people find themselves for their daily actions and behavior seems to be the key. The conclusion is, this part mainly discusses about the problems and challenges from the last stage of the naturalistic inquiry arc, which is writing. In naturalistic inquiry, writing flows from the previous analysis. This is the final step in the analysis and is the cornerstone for the entire research process. This is the phase where everything unites. The basic theory freezes and the center is proven to survive. This is a very valuable experience, first for the writer and then for the reader.
Okay, the next is Social Research Methods by Lawrence Newman. Chapter 13, Field Research and Focus Group Research. Understanding field research, most field studies focus on specific location or setting. Field research must start with a relatively small group that interact with each other regularly in fixed settings. For example, street corners, crutch, beauty salon bars. Ethnography and ethno-methodology. Ethnography is a description of their people or culture. The most important part of ethnography is in-depth description. The essence of ethnomethodology is that social meaning is fragile and fluctuating, which does not remain unstable or not solid. And then focus group research. Focus group are qualitative research technique in which the people in them are formally interviewed in a setting. Focus group research group discussion that have developed rapidly in the last 20 years. The procedure is that the researcher gathers 6 to 12 people in a room with a moderator to discuss various issues, generally about 90 minutes. And the next is chapter 14, is historical comparative research. Comparative research examines pattern of similarities and differences in all cases and tries to accept its diversity. The strength of comparative research is ability to exclude or offer alternative explanation for causal relationship. And then chapter 15 is qualitative data analysis. Qualitative data planning. First, open coding, which is in the first encoding in qualitative data that check the data to summarize into preliminary categories or coded analysis. And second is axial coding, which is the second stage in presentation of qualitative data that occur when researchers compile the code, link it, and find the main analytical categories. And third, selective coding, the final stage in qualitative data encoding that check previous codes to identify and select data that will support the conceptual presentation categories that have been developed. And the chapter's conclusion is doing good field research requires a combination of various point skills. Apart from its own strong researchers need to have an extraordinary ability to listen and absorb enormous details of patients. Field research is best when used to study the little Lombok humans who interact at this time. This is valuable from micro level or face-to-face interaction with small groups. This is less effective if the concern is macro-level processes and social structure.
And in this part, I'll explain about our case. Our case is intercultural communication pattern of parents-in-law and daughters-in-law. In this research, the method chosen by the author is qualitative method. The author concludes that the qualitative research method is a method that produces descriptive data. And next, I'll explain the relation of the case to the chapter. We start from research method for business. In the case we use as an example, the researcher used a descriptive qualitative method by means of in-depth interviews. Next, doing qualitative research, and in this chapter is mentioned about several methodology that applied in our case too, and there are 6 methodology. There are unifying, comparing incidents, integrate the categories and their provisions, limiting theory, and writing theory. Next, research methods for business chapter. In this the relation this chapter to our case is there are several practical methodology in telling about the community. Starts from structure. In this study, researchers use paragraph, effective paragraph. Second, vocabulary. Researchers use vocabulary that can be understood by many people. And last, audience. The audience that researcher trying to reach is the whole community. Next, social research methods, field research and focus group research. In this study, researchers only use field research, not focus group research. Next, social research methods, historical comparative research. In this study, researchers did not compare the result of the interview with the available historical evidence. Next, qualitative data analysis, and based on our cases, this case use the 3 data encoding. First, open coding. It means the researcher began to examine the result of the interviews that the researcher had obtained from the speakers. Second, Excel coding. Researchers have begun to share the result of interviews that researchers have obtained from the interviewers. And last, selective coding. The researcher really ascertain the result of the interview that had been submitted from many researchers, and from the relation from many chapters with our case, we conclude that creative strategies and social media management is qualitative data. From this paper, many ways are offered in conducting qualitative research, including starting from the use of primary data, using interviews as data collection, and secondary data, the use of data from objects that can tell stories related to the case. And we study the preparation that must be made from conducting qualitative research. And that's all from our group. Thank you.
Okay everyone, thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, you can write in column comment down below. And stay safe and have a nice day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.